Queen Victoria married the man she loved and was very happy throughout her marriage. She had 9 children. Despite this, she always said she hated being pregnant. She also claimed she did not like babies, who, according to her, looked as ugly as toads. Another confession she recorded in her diary, when she found out she was expecting her first daughter, was, "I became pregnant immediately, and that made me feel a violent rage. I begged God, day and night, to grant me at least 6 months of freedom. But my prayers were not heard, and here I am, unhappy." I cannot understand how anyone could wish for this at the very beginning of marriage. Regarding breastfeeding and the possibility of nursing her own children, she preferred not to do it and said, "I do not like women turned into dairy cows." And when her beloved husband died prematurely, she wrote in her diary, "I find no comfort in the company of my children. In fact, I rarely feel at ease with them. I wonder why Albert had to leave me and they remain at my side." Yes, my dears, that was Queen Victoria, and everything was recorded by her in the numerous diaries she left behind. And on this channel, we are going to present a series about the lives of Queen Victoria's 9 children. Do not miss a single episode. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to be the first to see our stories. And now, in today's episode, we will learn about Princess Victoria, the firstborn. Without a doubt, she was her father's favorite. A few months after the wedding, the Queen was already pregnant. Victoria, who at the time was enjoying the pleasures of conjugal life, was deeply disappointed. Although the Queen was in good health and during the early months of pregnancy could live a normal life, attending the opera and the theater with her husband, in a letter to her uncle Leopold, she confessed, "It is truly dreadful, and if the situation were not bad enough, after all I have suffered, a filthy little girl is born. I think I would drown her. I only wish for a boy." But her wish was not granted, and on the 21st day of November of the year 1840, the Queen, after a labor that lasted 12 endless hours, gave birth to a girl. When she was born, the doctor exclaimed sadly, "Ah, ma'am, it is a girl." And the Queen replied, "No matter. Next time it will be a prince." The royal princess was named Victoria, after her mother. After the birth of her first daughter, Victoria remained in bed for 2 weeks, during which time her husband, Prince Albert, tenderly cared for her. The prince was overjoyed. That little girl was a blessing to him. The Queen was also deeply moved by the attention she received from her husband. She wrote, "His care was like that of a mother. A more affectionate, attentive, and sensible nurse could not be found." As the daughter of the sovereign, Victoria was born a British princess. Furthermore, she was the heir presumptive to the throne of the United Kingdom from her birth until the birth of her brother, Prince Albert Edward, on the 9th day of November of the year 1841. She was baptized in the throne room of Buckingham Palace on the 10th day of February in the year 1841, on the first wedding anniversary of her parents. The lily font was specially commissioned for her christening. Since then, all princes and princesses, with a few exceptions, have been baptized in that font. It was also used for the baptism of all the children and grandchildren of Queen Elizabeth II, except for Princess Eugenie of York. The most recent baptism in that font was that of Princess Charlotte of Cambridge in the year 2015. Victoria showed precocity and intelligence from an early age. She began learning French at the age of 18 months and took up German at 4 years old. In addition, she also studied Latin and Greek. From the age of 6, her curriculum included arithmetic, geography, and history. Her father also instructed her in politics and philosophy. Her school days, which included 3 hours of recreation, began at 20 minutes past 8 in the morning and continued until 6 o'clock in the evening. Unlike her brother, whose educational program was even more rigorous, Victoria stood out as an exemplary student, displaying an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Queen Victoria, her mother, and her father sought to keep their children away from court life. This led them to acquire Osborne House, a property located on the Isle of Wight. Near the main residence, Prince Albert built a small country cottage inspired by Swiss style. This house included a tiny kitchen and a carpentry workshop. In that environment, the children engaged in manual work and practical activities. Young Victoria felt deep admiration for her father and inherited his liberal political convictions. In the year 1851, Prince Wilhelm of Prussia, who would later become Wilhelm I of Germany, and Princess Augusta of Saxe-Weimar visited the Grand Great Exhibition in London. These nobles maintained a close friendship with the British royal family. Queen Victoria and Princess Augusta were cousins. During that occasion, Princess Victoria, known as Vicky, had the opportunity to meet Prince Frederick. At that time, she was only 11 years old, while he was already 19. Nevertheless, they interacted well during that encounter. After the prince and his parents departed from London, Vicky and Frederick continued to correspond through letters, giving rise to a friendship between the two. Over time, Vicky grew into a young woman of short stature. Although many said she was beautiful, her appearance did not align with the conventional standards of beauty of the era. Nevertheless, her sharp intellect and knowledge stood out. She had a constant thirst for acquiring new knowledge and showed a particular interest in politics. In addition, she possessed a cheerful and friendly spirit. Prince Frederick fondly remembered the weeks he had spent with Princess Victoria. He often recalled that intelligent and kind young lady. At that time, he was under pressure to marry, although many believed a Grand Duchess from Russia would be the ideal match. However, he rejected that idea and suggested the possibility of marrying a British princess. Nevertheless, King Frederick William IV of Prussia, his uncle, was not at all enthusiastic about the idea. Prince Frederick had received a thorough education and had also undergone rigorous military training in line with the traditions of his family, the House of Hohenzollern. In the year 1855, he visited Vicky and her family at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. He wished to see her again to make sure she would be a suitable wife for him. However, in Berlin, many members of the Prussian court did not approve of the idea of that marriage. On this second visit, Vicky was already 15 years old. Queen Victoria, her mother, was deeply interested in the union and anxious about the possibility that the Prussian prince might not find her daughter attractive. However, from the very first dinner together, it became clear to both Queen Victoria and Prince Albert that the two young people liked each other very much. And just 3 days after joining the royal family, Frederick asked Vicky's parents for permission to marry her. Her parents were overjoyed by the news, but they gave their consent on the condition that the marriage would not take place before Vicky's 17th birthday. The engagement was publicly announced on the 17th day of May in the year 1856, but many people in Great Britain did not receive the news well. Everyone was upset because Prussia had not offered any support during the Crimean War, which took place between the years 1853 and 1856. The press criticized the Prussian royal family, claiming it was a problematic dynasty with a confusing foreign policy that depended on Russia. In Germany, the news was also not well received. Some liberals did view favorably the idea of forging ties with the British royal family, but a large portion of the aristocracy did not approve of the engagement. Prince Albert, the bride's father, supported the idea that Prussia could serve as a model of liberalism for other states and contribute to the unification of Germany. He hoped that his daughter would help make Germany more liberal. During the 2 years of his daughter's engagement, he taught her about European history and politics, keeping her informed about current affairs in Prussia. Father and daughter adored each other, and Queen Victoria suffered in silence over the amount of time Albert devoted to his beloved Vicky. The prince also decided that she should spend every evening with them. In her diary, Victoria would write, "We dined with Vicky. She usually leaves us around 10 o'clock, and at that moment I feel the bewildering happiness of being alone with my dear Albert." The truth was that the love and admiration Prince Albert felt for his eldest daughter caused deep discomfort in the sovereign, and he was profoundly affected by the thought of losing his favorite daughter, the one most like himself. The British Parliament granted £40,000 sterling to cover the dowry of the royal princess, along with an annual allowance of £8,000. King Frederick William IV increased his nephew's yearly stipend after the marriage. Even so, Frederick's income, as second in line to the throne, was not sufficient to cover all the expenses that he and Victoria had. Throughout most of their marriage, it was she who supported the household with her own funds. The members who would make up the couple's court were chosen by Frederick's aunt, Queen Elizabeth, and his mother, Princess Augusta. They assembled a staff composed largely of long-serving attendants, many of whom were significantly older than both Victoria and Frederick. Prince Albert, the bride's father, requested that his daughter have at least 2 British friends of her own age as ladies-in-waiting. However, the Prussians proposed a different arrangement. 2 German ladies-in-waiting would be appointed, and they agreed to accept Ernst von Stockmar, son of a close friend of Prince Albert, as Vicky's private secretary. Prince Albert also insisted that his daughter retain the title of royal princess after the marriage, which displeased the Prussians. Another point of contention was the location of the wedding ceremony. The groom's family believed that the marriage of the future King of Prussia ought to take place in Berlin, but Queen Victoria would not hear of it. She insisted her daughter should be wed in her own country, and in the end, she prevailed. Vicky's wedding to Frederick took place in the Royal Chapel at St. James's Palace in London on the 25th day of January in the year 1858. When Vicky moved to Berlin, a rich and frequent correspondence began between her and her parents. She sent weekly letters to her father, often commenting on political developments in Germany. In her letters to her mother, the influence of Queen Victoria was clearly present in her every step. The Queen insisted that Vicky show loyalty both to her homeland and to her new country. However, this quickly became an impossible task, and even the most trivial events gave rise to serious dilemmas for the princess. For example, when the Duchess of Orléans, a distant relative of both the British and Prussian royal families, passed away, London declared a mourning period of 1 month, while in Berlin it lasted only 1 week. Princess Vicky was required to observe the custom of the Prussian court, and for that she became the target of fierce criticism from her mother, who believed that as the royal princess and daughter of the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, she was duty-bound to uphold British traditions. The criticisms became so frequent that Baron Stockmar grew concerned about Vicky's mental health and asked Prince Albert to intervene and request that the Queen be more flexible in her demands toward her daughter. Shortly after the wedding, the princess became pregnant, and during the pregnancy, which was diagnosed as high risk, the Queen's advice to Vicky doubled. The monarch, who was the mother of 9 children and was about to become a grandmother, maintained an intense correspondence with her pregnant daughter. Vicky felt very happy during the pregnancy and was filled with excitement. She wrote to her mother saying it was thrilling to generate another being and to feel that new life growing inside her. The sovereign did not share Vicky's joy over the pregnancy in the slightest and, as usual, was quite blunt about motherhood, stating that she saw nothing beautiful in it and that women seemed like animals, like cows or bitches, forced to procreate. The Queen also made it clear that she did not trust German doctors and sent her own midwife and personal obstetrician to assist her daughter. On the 27th day of January in the year 1859, Victoria gave birth to her first child, who would one day become the German Emperor William II. The birth was extremely complicated. The lady responsible for alerting the doctors when labor began delayed in doing so. Moreover, the doctors hesitated to examine the princess because she was wearing only a thin nightgown. The baby was in the breech position, and the delay in the delivery nearly caused the death of both mother and child. Eventually, the doctors succeeded in saving them both. However, the baby suffered damage to the brachial plexus, was born nearly lifeless, and the maneuvers used to revive him were so aggressive that they caused irreversible damage to the nerves in the newborn's arm. The difficult labor led to fetal distress, depriving the future Kaiser of oxygen for an extended period, which could have caused other neurological issues. The doctors rushed to reassure Vicky and Frederick, insisting that the baby could make a full recovery from the injuries, and for that reason, the couple chose not to inform the British court of William's condition. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that the child's arm would not fully recover. After 4 months of uncertainty, Vicky decided to break the sad news to her parents. As the boy grew, his left arm failed to develop properly, ultimately ending up 15 centimeters shorter than his right arm. The child, who was well placed in the line of succession and had strong prospects of becoming a monarch, was subjected to various treatments in an attempt to cure his withered arm. Unusual and bizarre methods were employed, such as animal baths, in which the arm was inserted into the entrails of freshly killed rabbits, which were performed regularly. In addition, William also underwent sessions of electric shock therapy to stimulate the nerves connecting his left arm to his neck, as well as to prevent his head from tilting to one side. Vicky was determined to make William a good horseman, as she considered it unacceptable for the heir to the throne not to know how to ride. Riding lessons began when he was 8 years old, and he was subjected to rigorous training, even when he cried or fell repeatedly. After weeks of effort, he finally managed to ride successfully and maintain his balance, but the experience caused him trauma, and later William would attribute the torment he endured during those lessons to his mother. William's disability was a source of pain and shame for Vicky. Her letters and diaries reflect the sorrow she felt over her son's arm and the guilt she bore for having given birth to a child with a disability. She expressed her deep frustration in a letter to her parents in the year 1860, writing that William was a very intelligent boy and that she would be immensely proud of him if it were not for that wretched arm. Sigmund Freud once suggested that Victoria was unable to accept her son's disability, and as a result grew emotionally distant from him, something that may have affected William II's future behavior. However, other historians argue that Vicky was affectionate with her children and tried to raise them according to the principles of her father, Prince Albert. What is certain is that her relationship with her eldest son was a very difficult one. As from an early age, he sensed his mother's nervousness whenever she approached him, which led him to believe that she simply despised him. 18 months after William's birth, on the 24th of July in the year 1860, his second sister, Princess Charlotte, was born, this time without complications, to everyone's relief. However, that princess showed slow development and a very difficult personality, frequently displaying outbursts of anger during childhood. From an early age, she exhibited restless behavior and signs of agitation, such as tugging at people's clothes. She soon developed the habit of biting her nails, which led her mother to make her wear gloves at all times. As a result, the girl stopped biting her nails, but began to gnaw on other objects instead. Queen Victoria wrote to her daughter, "Tell Charlotte that I was horrified to hear she is biting objects. Grandmama does not approve of girls behaving in that manner." In the year 1863, Vicky recorded in her diary, "Charlotte's mind seems too active for her body. She moves rapidly from a nervous state to heightened sensitivity. Her sleep is not as peaceful as it ought to be, and she is noticeably thin." Charlotte experienced intense fits of rage, which deeply upset her mother. Vicky described them as explosions of fury and stubbornness so severe that the girl would scream until she turned blue. As she grew older, her health became delicate and her irritable temper only worsened, turning her into someone truly difficult to handle. Some historians suggest that Charlotte may have suffered from porphyria, the same genetic disorder that also afflicted her great-great-grandfather, King George III. This might also explain the gastrointestinal problems, migraines, and nervous breakdowns that constantly affected her. 6 months after the birth of Princess Charlotte, on the 2nd of January in the year 1861, King Frederick William IV died, and his brother, who had already been serving as regent since the year 1858, ascended the throne as King William I. Frederick became the new Crown Prince of Prussia, but his new position brought no improvement to his life. His father refused to increase his annual allowance, leaving him in a strained financial situation, and it was his wife, Vicky, who virtually supported the entire family on her own. Prince Albert was outraged by this situation. He wrote in a letter, "It is evident that someone is opposing the financial independence of the princess. She has not received a single penny from Prussia, which is already regrettable in itself, and she has had to use her own dowry, which should not be necessary. If they continue to withhold money from the poor crown prince merely because his wife is wealthy, the result will be that the princess ends up poor." Another issue the couple faced was that they could not travel outside Prussia without the king's approval. Rumors emerged that this measure was intended to restrict Vicky's trips to the United Kingdom due to her father's liberal ideas. The Prussian king did not approve of those ideas and, as time passed, grew increasingly distrustful of Prince Albert, his son Frederick, and his daughter-in-law Vicky. But on the 14th of December in the year 1861, a terrible event shattered the princess's world. Her beloved father, Prince Albert, died of typhoid fever. Vicky was left completely devastated by the news. She was accompanied by her husband to England to attend her father's funeral. On the 14th of August in the year 1862, she gave birth to her third child, Prince Henry, and 2 years later, on the 15th of September in the year 1864, she had her fourth child, Prince Sigismund. From the moment she arrived in her new homeland, Victoria led a difficult life. She did not adapt well to local traditions and expectations, which generated much criticism against her. Vicky, in general, did not feel comfortable in her new home and also faced considerable pressure from her mother not to abandon English manners, which had a significant psychological impact on her. The princess became the target of many criticisms from those who harbored resentment toward the English, as most people would have preferred that the prince marry a Russian Grand Duchess. They often gathered and publicly mocked the princess, even in her presence. Vicky felt utterly humiliated and displayed great insecurity. She was required to attend theaters, banquets, balls, and public events alongside those very individuals who constantly ridiculed her. And following the announcement of the engagement between her brother, the Prince of Wales, and Princess Alexandra of Denmark, daughter of King Christian IX, who was a prominent rival of Prussia, Victoria's position at the Berlin court became even more precarious. German public opinion believed that the crown princess was influencing an alliance between Denmark and the United Kingdom. During an official visit to the city of Danzig, Frederick caused an incident by openly criticizing the policies of his father and of Bismarck, the new prime minister. Naturally, Vicky did not escape the backlash. In fact, many suspected that she had been the one behind her husband's remarks. And despite facing heavy criticism in Germany, the couple began to receive praise in Britain through the press. However, this only further complicated the situation for Frederick and Vicky, as one published article included day-to-day details that suggested Vicky had been sharing confidential information with the press. This led to an official investigation, and under that pressure, Vicky's private secretary, Ernst von Stockmar, resigned from his position. During the conflict between the German Confederation and Denmark, the British government chose not to intervene, despite the family ties of the Prince of Wales with Copenhagen. This decision had repercussions within the royal family, which was deeply divided regarding the war. Furthermore, in Berlin, many suspected that Princess Vicky was not pleased with the Prussian military advances against the homeland of her sister-in-law, Alexandra. Despite the criticism and mistrust, Vicky expressed her full support for the German troops and became actively involved in aiding wounded soldiers. She and her husband created a social fund to support the families of soldiers who had died or been severely injured. And while the war continued, Frederick enlisted in the Prussian army and took active part in the fighting. Vicky hoped that her husband's military achievements would help people better understand her role as the wife of the heir to the throne. She was genuinely concerned about the harsh criticism she received, and with good reason, for no one was ever satisfied with her. She was seen as excessively British in Prussia and excessively Prussian in Great Britain. Prussia emerged victorious against Denmark and signed the Treaty of Vienna on the 30th of October in the year 1864. Almost 2 years later, on the 18th of June in the year 1866, during the Austro-Prussian War, Vicky and Frederick suffered a painful blow. Their fourth child, Sigismund, only 21 months old, died of meningitis. The tragedy had a devastating impact on the princess, who found no comfort from either her mother or her mother-in-law. Queen Victoria, still in deep mourning over the loss of her Prince Albert, who had died 5 years earlier, was unable to fully understand her daughter's emotions and could not help her, as she believed the loss of a child to be far less painful than the loss of a husband. From her mother-in-law, Queen Augusta, she received no sympathy either. The latter simply urged her daughter-in-law to promptly resume her official duties. The Crown Prince frequently represented the Berlin court on international trips, but Vicky rarely accompanied him, primarily to reduce expenses. Moreover, she did not wish to be far from her children for long periods. After the death of Sigismund, the family grew with the birth of 4 more children. Victoria in April of 1866, Valdemar in February of 1867, 1868, Sophia in June of 1870, and finally Margaret in April of 1872. While the older children, William, Charlotte, and Harry, were cared for by nannies, the younger ones, Victoria, Valdemar, Sophia, and Margaret, were personally raised by Vicky, which caused many conflicts both with her mother and with her mother-in-law. The relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law was very difficult. Any action by Victoria became a cause for intense criticism from Queen Augusta. In fact, throughout the court, her mother-in-law was the harshest critic of her. On the 19th of July in 1870, the Franco-Prussian War began, an event that would culminate in the fall of the Second French Empire. Frederick played an active role in the fight against the French, successfully leading the Third German Army. Bismarck, jealous of the military success of the heir to the throne, sought to undermine his reputation. He publicly and baselessly accused the Crown Prince of protecting France under the influence of his wife. This quickly became headline news in the German press. Meanwhile, Vicky devoted herself to caring for wounded soldiers, but her efforts went unrecognized. She had built a military hospital in Hamburg, managing it and covering the costs herself. Furthermore, she personally visited wounded war soldiers in various locations. Yet despite all this, the only result was more criticism and accusations. She was accused of taking on duties normally assigned to the Queen, which caused dissatisfaction among her parents-in-law. William I ordered her to cease her charitable activities and return to Berlin to represent the royal family in her proper role. In January of 1871, William I was proclaimed hereditary emperor of the newly formed Germany. Frederick and Vicky assumed the titles of German Crown Prince and Crown Princess, and Otto von Bismarck was appointed imperial chancellor. Although Frederick was named field marshal due to his military performance during the wars, he was not assigned command of any troops after the Franco-Prussian War. In fact, the emperor himself did not show confidence in his son and sought to keep him away from state affairs because of his ideas, which were considered very English. Instead, the Crown Prince received the title of curator of the royal museums, a role that found some enthusiasm from his wife. Vicky was passionate about art and culture. She practiced painting and also supported education, being a member of associations aimed at improving women's instruction. Starting in 1877, she founded schools for girls and also established nursing schools. As her children grew into adults, Vicky began to seek suitors for them. In 1878, Her daughter Charlotte married her cousin Bernhard, Crown Prince of Saxe-Meiningen, a marriage that pleased the Berlin court greatly. In March of 1879, Vicky suffered another great tragedy with the death of her son Waldemar, who was only 11 years old and who died of diphtheria. This loss was especially devastating for the princess, as it was caused by the same disease that had taken her sister Alice and her niece just a few months earlier. Despite the suffering, she tried to hide her pain, as few family members were willing to comfort her. 3 years later, Vicky began negotiating the marriage of her son William to Princess Augusta Victoria, an action that caused outrage in conservative German circles, since the princess's family had been deposed by Prussia. Augusta Victoria was considered to lack the status and resources appropriate for a marriage with the heir to the German Empire. Despite prolonged negotiations, Vicky secured the marriage, but she felt very disappointed when she realized that her daughter-in-law did not possess the liberal personality she had expected. Already in 1881, her daughter Victoria fell in love with Prince Alexander I of Bulgaria. Vicky tried to obtain the emperor's permission for the engagement. However, the Bulgarian prince had been born of a morganatic marriage, which placed him in an inferior position before the German royal house. William I disapproved of that marriage, which deeply disappointed both Vicky and Frederick. This conflict between the emperor and his son, the heir, resulted in the exclusion of Prince Frederick in favor of his son William at official ceremonies and important events. Several times it was the grandson of William I who represented the Berlin court abroad, instead of the crown prince himself. In 1887, the health of William I, who was 90 years old, rapidly deteriorated, indicating that the succession to the throne was near. However, the heir also faced his own health problems. Father and son were both in very poor health. In June of 1887, with the approval of their doctors, Frederick accompanied his wife Vicky to Great Britain to celebrate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. During that trip, the couple carried with them 3 boxes filled with personal documents they wished to keep secret, away from the eyes of Bismarck and the German royal family. But Prince Frederick's health continued to decline, and the doctor suggested he go to Italy for treatment. In September of 1887, Frederick and Victoria departed for San Remo, Italy, which caused great indignation in Berlin, as the emperor's health was very poor, and the royal couple was not even in the capital. Things did not improve for Frederick, who completely lost his ability to speak in November of that year, which led to further examinations. It was then that he was finally diagnosed with a malignant tumor in his larynx. The only treatment option was removal of the larynx, but Frederick refused to undergo the procedure. Victoria supported her husband's decision, resulting in an intense argument with their son William, who had arrived in Italy shortly before. William accused his mother, Vicky, of being pleased with Frederick's illness, which further increased the tension between them. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Emperor William I's health continued to decline until, on the 9th of March, 1888, he finally passed away. His son, Frederick, succeeded him as King of Prussia and German Emperor under the name Frederick III. But as we can imagine, his reign was extremely short, as he was gravely ill. He died on the 15th of June, 1888, only 99 days after ascending the throne. With the death of Frederick III, his son William became the new German emperor, known as Kaiser William II. Shortly after announcing his father's death, William II ordered soldiers to occupy the imperial residence. Frederick and Victoria's quarters were thoroughly searched for compromising documents. However, the search was unsuccessful, as all the couple's correspondence had already been transferred to Windsor Castle the previous year. Frederick III's funeral was held in Potsdam and was quite simple. The now Dowager Empress Victoria did not attend the ceremony, but participated in a memorial mass for her husband at the royal estate of Bornstedt. With the death of Frederick III, Victoria became known as Empress Frederick. In the weeks following her father's death, William II took steps to eliminate all institutions and dismiss or remove people close to his parents, rigorously investigating everyone who had a close relationship with them. Victoria had to leave New Palace, the residence where she lived, because William II wished to establish his own residence there. She was also unable to move to Sanssouci, another royal residence. Thus, she acquired a property in the former Duchy of Nassau. On that property, Empress Frederick built a castle in tribute to her husband, Frederick III. Victoria spent most of the year at that castle, frequently accompanied by her younger daughters. She only left for trips abroad. Despite the wishes of her son, the emperor, who preferred that she leave Germany permanently, she maintained her own court at that castle and continued to have close relations with liberal circles. Her daughter, Princess Sophia, married the future King Constantine I of Greece in October of 1889. The following year, Princess Victoria, who was unable to marry the ruler of Bulgaria, married Prince Adolf, who would become the future regent of the Principality of Lipa. In 1893, Princess Margaret married Prince Frederick Charles of Hesse, who was later elected to the throne of the short-lived Kingdom of Finland. Although she was pleased with these marriages, the departure of her daughters left her increasingly isolated. Over time, she was completely removed from public life by her son, William II. After the death of her mother-in-law, Empress Augusta, Victoria hoped to succeed her as patron of the German Red Cross and the Patriotic Women's Association. However, she was greatly surprised when it was her daughter-in-law, Empress Augusta Victoria, who took over the presidency of those organizations. This caused her great bitterness. Isolated and frustrated by her son's actions, she spent her last years in an increasingly marginalized position. She found some solace in painting and in visits to the artists' colony in Kronberg. She also enjoyed walking in the mornings and spent long hours writing letters or reading in the library of her castle. Toward the end of 1898, she suffered a severe blow when doctors diagnosed her with inoperable breast cancer, a diagnosis that forced her to spend extended periods bedridden. The cancer spread to her spine in the autumn of 1900, further worsening her condition. On the 22nd of January, 1901, she received the painful news of the death of her mother, Queen Victoria, and less than 7 months later, she died at the age of 60 in her castle on the 5th of August, 1901. Mother and daughter, two monarchs of the 19th century, the mother with a long and fruitful reign, the daughter with a short and tumultuous reign. Both were named Victoria and died within a short span of time from each other. But before that, they exchanged many letters that have withstood the passage of time. There were 3,777 letters from Queen Victoria addressed to her firstborn daughter and approximately 4,000 letters as replies from the daughter to the mother, all meticulously cataloged and preserved. They are like a gallery of mirrors that clearly reflects life at the English court and at the Prussian court throughout the period from 1858 to 1900. Through them, we can see the personal concerns that occupied the hearts of these two women. They reveal not only the threads of royalty and their dynasties, but also the scars, anxieties, and human ambitions of those who ruled thrones. Victoria, the Empress Frederick, was buried alongside her husband on the 13th of August, 1901, in the royal crypt of the Friedenskirche Church in Potsdam. Their two children who died in infancy are also interred in that mausoleum.